Why are fighting games dying? My brother in Christ. Fighting games are dying? Oh. We just had the most insane, like, past couple of years for fighting games, right? Like, Mortal Kombat bombed again. That sucks. It sold extremely well up until Chaos Reigns. But Tekken 8, people like it more than Tekken 7, and Tekken 7 was already very highly regarded, right? Tekken 7 was a great fighting game. Tekken 8 is an even better fighting game. Street Fighter 6 is the best Street Fighter in fucking years. Now, granted, Street Fighter 5 got to the point of being a really, really good fighting game, but that was like 4 years later. Dude, when that game first came out for like the first 3 or 4 seasons, nobody liked it. It was not fun to play. It was super fucking boring. Mortal Kombat 11 bombed. Injustice 2, I found a lot of fun in it. Not a lot of people liked it because of the zoning playstyle, the zoning heavy playstyle. But the past couple of years for fighting games have been fucking insane. This video, I could see being released like in 2021. But this video being released post Street Fighter 6 and post Tekken 8. What? Alright, anyway, let's watch it.
Was this one of the worst years ever for fighting games? Wait, I know what you're thinking. Some of you are probably laughing and thinking, this person's crazy, right? Admit it. You've already started replaying some of the most epic moments from this year in your head. The incredible release of Tekken 8 that had us glued to our screens, the mind-blowing announcement that Mai Shiranui and Terry Bogard are stepping into Street Fighter 6, breaking every expectation.
Yeah.
And then, seemingly out of nowhere, the Marvel
vs. Capcom 2, I forgot to mention that.
A nostalgic surprise that hit us.
Bro, how can you say this is a horrible year for fighting games? Marvel vs. Capcom is back, bro. Like, this was like a 1 in 3,678,530,274 chance. And it happened, my brother. It happened. We got Marvel vs. Capcom back. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which you have not been able to purchase this game since like 2012. Maybe earlier than that, right? It's back. And now there's a good chance that Marvel vs. Capcom 4, 5, whatever they call it, because Infinite came after 3, so are they going to go back to doing it and do 4? Are they going to do 5? Whatever. Like, how can... Alright, anyway.
All like a perfectly timed hyper combo. So, I am crazy, right? Well, yes, but that doesn't detract from the point I'm about to make in this video. Because while it may seem like in some ways that this year has been phenomenal on the surface, there's more to this story than meets the eye. And when I say more, what I really mean is a lot less, as this is the least fighting game content we have been provided with since Street Fighter 2's success popped up back in 1991. Yes, that's right, we have been mostly starved out of new fighting game experiences as choices across the genre are dying out. As beneath the hype and headlines, if we stop swigging...
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut them off again. Right now, as of this moment, yes, a couple of the games I'm going to list are older, but we are not in the arcade days anymore, right? We are not, we just aren't. And this cycle of life for each fighting game has been this way since like Street Fighter 4, right? Outside of NetherRealm. So right now, as of this moment, you can go play Guilty Gear Strive, which is a fantastic fighting game. Dragon Ball FighterZ just got rollback netcode. Fantastic fighting game. You can go play MK1. Isn't the best. Better than MK11. You can go play Tekken 8, Street Fighter 6, King of Fighters 15, BlazBlue, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Arcade Classics collection. You can go back and play Third Strike on one of the other Capcom fighting collections. And you can play all of these online with decent netcode. Damn it, chat. I didn't mean to pause there. Anyway, like, you have so many fun fighting games you can go play that are still actively receiving content. Guilty Gear Strive just received new content earlier this year. Just received a new fighter. Street Fighter 6 is still getting content. Tekken 8, Clive just dropped yesterday. Dragon Ball FighterZ just got rollback netcode. King of Fighters 15, I don't really keep up too much with that. Still a fun fucking fighting game. Right? Like, what do you mean, dude?
Nostalgia Kool-Aid for a second, next to nothing new or exciting has transpired this year. So join me today as we look back at a year that made many of us very excited over very little, and sadly why we have been more deprived of new fighting game content than at any point in modern history. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This was an awful year for fighting games, so let's dig in. Yeah. Now, before you start typing angrily in the comments, let me be clear. I adore fighting games, and while I stand by my critique, this year hasn't been entirely devoid of bright spots. I even went to the effort of highlighting some of the last 12 months' greatest moments as I opened this video, so I am certainly not denying there is a lot of fun to be had. What's even better is the Instant Gaming Black Friday 2024 sale has started, so if you're a fighting game fan or just love a great deal, you're in for a treat. Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6 and enjoy today's sponsor. While the games I just mentioned clearly have their fan bases, and deservedly so, I can't help but feel increasingly frustrated with the state of the fighting game genre lately. It's been feeling downright stagnant, with new releases trickling out at a snail's pace. Honestly, it's the polar opposite of when I was a kid and fell in love with this style of gaming, when every year brought something fresh and exciting on multiple occasions. If we're talking major fighting game releases, the only brand new title we've gotten this entire year is Tekken 8, and that came out way back in January. Is it any wonder it feels like we've been waiting an eternity for publishers to give us something truly new to sink our teeth into? Well, compared to the past, that's an absolutely absurd amount of time for even a single fighting game developer to go without releasing something new, let alone the entire industry collectively serving up next to nothing. At first, I thought maybe I was being overly critical, or perhaps I must have missed something. However, two other sources all but confirm how little has gone on this year. Firstly, all you need to do is look at the fighting game nominees for Jeff Keighley's dubious Game Awards. And hilariously, Tekken 8 is the only actual new versus fighting game up for nominations. The rest, a sorry lineup. Grand Blue Fantasy vs Rising, which released back in 2023. Multiverses, a game we've been able to play since 2022. Marvel vs Capcom Fighting Collection, which is just a bundle of ancient arcade games. And Dragon Ball Spark.
This guy's opinion just like went straight down the toilet bowl for me, to be completely honest, because you cannot just say, oh, the Marvel vs. Capcom collection, you know, just a bunch of a collection of ancient fighting games. You can't just say that. The what it means to the fighting game world to have that Marvel vs. Capcom collection released is astronomical. Like, this guy, if you don't understand, like, I'm not trying to be abrasive, I'm not trying to be a jackass, but, like, if you don't understand the gravity of that, then you really don't need to be speaking on the subject. Because he's speaking like he's a part of this community, and, like, he understands the ins and outs and everything, and if he was, he would understand what that collection being released, what it means to the fighting game community. Right? Like, what it means, bro. We didn't expect it to happen. We thought Marvel vs. Capcom was dead forever. And that being released means it's not. People can play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 again. And they can play it online. They can purchase it. We are in the good timeline.
Sparking Zero, which, let's be honest, isn't a traditional versus fighter. It's an arena fighter that doesn't belong in the same breadth as these other titles.
I disagree. Arena fighters are good, and Sparking Zero was a good
is the only remotely fresh versus fighter to make it into this category speaks volumes about how laughably little has happened in the fighting game scene this year. Let's be honest, a few more actual new fighting games were released besides just Tekken. There were a handful of indie fighting games, along with efforts from smaller studios, but they were completely ignored at the Game Awards in favour of games that didn't even belong in the category. But really, are we surprised? This is the Game Awards we're talking about, a hollow spectacle where corporate shills gather to pat each other on the back, flaunt trailers for games that won't release for years, and hand out awards to whatever titles had the biggest marketing budgets. It's no wonder the fighting game category feels like an afterthought, crammed with nominees that sold okay but barely qualified in order to fill a quota. If anything, the fighting game category is a disheartening reminder of how far the genre has slid down the ladder of industry importance. To truly grasp how little effort has gone into releasing new fighting games this year, a quick visit to FightersGeneration.com paints a bleak picture. Their timeline section lays it all out, year by year, showing the steady decline in fighting game releases. For 2024, the site lists a measly 5 titles, and these include Tekken 8, the one AAA fighting game release of the year. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting
I think the
Collection,
message literally said
a compilation of
Loser
old
Else
games,
Cross.
not a new entry, Rage of the Dragons Neo, another re-release, and 2 additional overlooked titles. So before we officially declare this year a bust and explore why the genre's output has dried up, let's take a moment to look at the outings that the Game Awards and others have chosen to fully ignore. Let's start with this one, Blazing Strike. Blazing Strike is a 2D fighting game developed by Rare Breed Makes Games and published by Arxis
Actually
Games.
looks really
Released
good,
on
though.
October
That looks
17th,
crazy
2024,
cool.
the game draws heavy inspiration from classic arcade fighters created by industry legends like Capcom and SNK. Blazing Strike was brought to life with the goal of paying homage to classic fighting games while adding a fresh twist to the genre. It aimed to capture the excitement and nostalgia of early 2D pixel art fighting games, while incorporating modern mechanics to appeal to both long-time fans and newcomers. Amongst the gameplay, a unique rush system feature can be found, which allows players to enhance moves, chain combos, and increase
Actually, looks
movement
pretty cool.
speed. The roster includes 14 diverse fighters, each with distinct playstyles, as well as 3 hidden bosses. Players can enjoy several modes, including a full story mode with extensive cutscenes, dialogue and missions, along with Versus Arcade online mode supported by rollback netcode for smoother online play. The reception to Blazing Strike has been mixed. Critics and players alike have praised its retro-inspired art style, noting the tall, well-rendered sprites and smooth animations reminiscent of classic SNK titles.
Yeah, it looks good.
However, many reviewers have criticised the game's limited depth and lack of innovation. While
Maybe that's
its
why we haven't
nostalgic
heard of it.
elements were well received, some reviewers found the fighting mechanics to be underwhelming and the story poorly executed. On Steam, it holds a mixed rating based on user feedback, reflecting its divisive nature among players. Despite its mixed reception, you can clearly see a great deal of love was poured into this one, with it serving as a unique tribute to the legacy of 2D fighting games, combining nostalgic aesthetics with modern gameplay mechanics. But you can see why this title hasn't been talked about a great deal yet compared to other fighters from over the years. Who knows though, with a Super Turbo Champion Edition or two, maybe things could change. Earlier this year, we also got Under Night in Birth 2, a 2D fighting game developed by French Bread and published by Arc
That looks
System
cool.
Works. Released on
I want a
January
Berserk
25th,
fighting game, bro.
2024,
We're
it
gonna
serves
talk
as a
about that
sequel
soon
to
in, like,
Under
an
Night
actual
in
video.
Birth, and brings
I don't
the
know if you
events
guys
of
watch
the original
anime.
game to a
I've just gotten
dramatic
into it
conclusion.
myself, but like I want a
Available on
Berserk
PlayStation
fighting
4,
game.
PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and Microsoft Windows, the game continues the series' legacy of blending complex mechanics with engaging storytelling. The roster has been expanded to 24 fighters with the introduction of 3 new characters. Each fighter comes with unique moves and playstyles, providing a rich and diverse combat experience. New gameplay mechanics such as Creeping Edge and Celestial Vorpal add layers of strategic depth, while the visuals have been upgraded with high-definition pixel art. Additionally, the game includes a full
Looks good.
story mode that concludes the narrative of the Hollow Knight, offering fans closure to the series' overarching plot. The game has been generally well received by players and critics alike. The refined combat mechanics, diverse character roster, and engaging story mode have garnered praise. The addition of rollback netback code has been particularly appreciated, delivering a smoother and more reliable online experience. However, some critics have pointed out a lack of significant innovation in certain areas and suggested that the presentation could be more polished. With its blend of modern enhancements and classic gameplay elements, Under Night in Birth 2 successfully delivers
Fighting games
an
are a hard
experience that
genre to
appeals
break
both
into if you're
long-time
not like
fans
one of
of
the
the
big,
genre and newcomers
big
seeking a
names.
deep and rewarding fighting
Blaze
game.
Blue,
While
Guilty
it may
Gear,
be more niche
Tekken,
compared to
Mortal
Tekken 8,
Kombat, Street
it
Fighter,
unquestionably deserves a
Marvel
spot on Jeff
versus
Keighley's
Capcom.
questionable list of nominees over some of the less fitting choices. Its omission
King of
is a
Fighters.
disappointing oversight,
If you're not
highlighting
Legacy,
how
it's hard to break
easily
into.
unique titles can be overlooked in favour of the more mainstream or recycled offerings, just like slapping the old Marvel vs. Capcom games together, for example, then nominating it for Fighting Game of the Year. The Game Awards are a
Yeah.
complete joke. Rivals
No,
of Aether-
they're not. Nominating Marvel vs. Capcom, the Marvel vs. Capcom collection for Fighting Game of the Year is because it's such a fucking astronomical event in the fighting game community. We did not think these games would ever come back. We haven't been able to buy them for fucking years, dude. We haven't been able to buy. I'm 26, and you haven't been able to buy those games since I was like 12.
2 is a 2.5D platform fighting game developed by Aether
This guy
Studios.
just seems to have a hate
Released
boner for
on
the Game
October
Awards,
the
too.
23rd, 2024 for Microsoft Windows via Steam, this is a direct sequel to the acclaimed 2017 title Rivals of Aether. This installment marks a shift from 2D pixel art to 3D models, introducing new mechanics like shielding, grabbing, and ledge interactions while retaining the fan-favourite elements such as parrying. These changes aim to enhance the depth of gameplay while making
He
it
also
more
seems to
accessible
have a
to
hard on for
wider
indie
audience.
titles, which I mean
Led
is
by
fine.
Dan
There's nothing wrong with
Fulness
that.
of Aether
But
Studios,
having a hate boner
a man
for the
we've
Game
talked about
Awards,
before on here in the past, and supported by Ludwig Agrens Off-Brand Games,
I get
after a
it.
successful Kickstarter
Damn.
campaign, Rivals of Aether 2
Seems like this
showcases their
video should have
dedication
just
to
been like
advancing the
titled
platform
Game
and fighting
Awards
genre.
is dumb.
The team prioritized creating a well-rounded experience by appealing to competitive players while expanding single-player and casual content, ensuring a balanced offering for all types of players. Not bad for a lad who first made a Super Smash Bros. Fan game. Rivals of Aether 2 has been widely praised for its competitive depth and accessibility. The inclusion of new mechanics like shields and ledge grabbing have been noted as significant steps forward, striking a balance between catering to newcomers and satisfying veterans. Additionally, the game's monetization model provides free future characters and modes while offering optional cosmetics, and this has received commendation for its player-friendly approach, something that certainly cannot be said for Tekken 8, Mortal Kombat 1 or Street Fighter 6. All three of those big games have been criticised recently for being greedy and predatory. Many would indeed view Rivals of Aether 2 as a worthy contender in discussions about the year's most significant fighting game releases. However, for whatever reason, the Game Awards didn't feel the same about it as I do. So when you add these three smaller releases to Tekken 8, we're left with a grand total of 4 new fighting games for the year. 4. And yes, I suppose I might have missed a few ultra-obscure titles that slipped under the radar, so please by all means feel free to enlighten me in the comments if you're eager to defend the year's output. But let's be real, compared to the golden days of the genre, this tinsy-wincy list of output
90% of
is
games are
downright
greedy nowadays.
embarrassing. But this is
Why are we
insane,
singling
right?
out
As we
fighting?
keep
I mean,
getting
like,
told,
yeah, we need to single
competitive
out
fighters are
everybody.
more popular than ever. So if this is the case, why are we getting so very few good new ones? Let's discuss. The
Because they
rise of
take
esports
longer to
infrastructure,
make
driven
now.
by platforms like Twitch and YouTube, has made fighting game tournaments more accessible than ever to a global audience. Events like EVO and Capcom Pro Tour now have the reach to showcase the incredible skill of top players to millions.
They're
Many
also
enjoy watching these events as fighting games
they're also easier to update. They're easier to update and to support. That's why they're taking longer.
themselves are highly viewer-friendly. The straightforward, intense nature of two players facing off in short, action-packed matches makes them easy to follow, even for casual viewers. Over the years, iconic franchises like Street Fighter, Tekken, and Mortal Kombat have further strengthened the genre, building loyal communities through years of updates and consistent support. Meanwhile, advancements such as rollback netcode have revolutionized online play, ensuring a smoother, more competitive experience, thus making high-level matches accessible to players around the world. However, despite this surge in popularity, the industry is seeing fewer new fighting games than ever before. Like video games from most popular modern genres, development costs for fighting games are getting steeper and steeper, requiring extensive balancing, precise animations, and robust netcode. So rather than treating us to tons of fighting games like in the past, many studios have greedily shifted towards extending the lifespans of existing
Is that
titles
greedy?
through DLC and updates, rather than risking investment in entirely new projects.
Is that greedy? That's not really greedy. I mean, look at Street Fighter V. Capcom took one of the worst fighting games they've released, in my opinion, like in modern times. Street Fighter 4, great, right? Street Fighter 6, great. Street Fighter 5 was bad for like the first 3 years, but because they didn't abandon the game and all of the work, the hard work that dedicated people put into that game, they didn't abandon it. Street Fighter 5 is now like one of the best fighting games ever, in my opinion. I mean, okay, maybe not one of the best fighting games ever, but they turned it into a damn fucking good fighting game, right? Better than most, right? No, it's not the best Street Fighter, right? But they didn't abandon it, and they turned it into something that nobody liked. It was hyper esports balanced. It was boring. It was not fun to play. They turned it into a super fun game that I still like to go back and play. Jesus Christ. Capcom didn't abandon Street Fighter V, and they turned it into a fantastic fighting game by the time everything was said and done. These games are taking longer to develop because the budgets are bigger. It is smarter, and even, I would argue, better for the consumer if they continue the development of these games, evolve them, turn them into something new, without going back to how it used to be, where we're shelling out another $40 to $60 for an ultimate version of the game. There are like 3 different versions of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, right? 2 different versions of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Ultimate and Normal. there are like 2 or 3 different versions, maybe 4 different versions of Street Fighter 4, right? There are even now still 2 different versions, I believe, of Street Fighter 5. I would rather them do what they're doing now, where they keep a game in like a development cycle for 4 or so years, evolve that game to where it's basically a different game by the time it's all said and done, instead of releasing an ultimate or whatever version of the game and expecting me to pay another $60, right? Are you going to address the allegations that the bug assaulted you and won despite it being 1/120th of your size? Look, that motherfucker snuck up on me, okay? It was a cheap shot, all right? And I got his ass back.
This strategy is compounded by the dominance of legacy franchises, which hold such a strong grip on the market that new games struggle to gain any traction. The extended lifespans of games like Tekken 7 and Street Fighter 5 in the past built loyal returning player bases, but they also saturated the competitive space, reducing the demand for new entries. In fairness, this approach makes sense for franchises like Tekken and Street Fighter, but it also means Capcom will likely continue to deprive us of new entries in beloved series like Darkstalkers or Rival Schools. That's
I'll
a
agree,
real
those two
shame,
need to come
especially
back.
when you consider that part of the reason Tekken and Street Fighter can get away with selling us new content for the same games year after year is by leveraging our nostalgia. Just look at this year's Street Fighter 6 announcements. Every single one of the 4 new characters revealed hails from past games, with no truly original fighters introduced. That's no accident, it's a calculated move to keep fans invested by tapping into our love for what's familiar, rather than taking risks with something fresh. This reliance on nostalgia has become a cornerstone of the fighting game industry's current strategy, encouraging players to keep paying for updates, DLC, and anniversary re-releases of legacy titles. Studios have discovered that revisiting beloved franchises and characters over and over and over and over
Is it
again
really preying on our nostalgia? Oh, wow, chat. I keep pausing the video at the wrong time. Lord have mercy. Anyway, is it really preying on our nostalgia, or is it like giving us these super hype crossovers that we never thought we'd get? Like, getting Terry Bogard in Street Fighter and Street Fighter 6 was kind of crazy. Getting him in Street Fighter was kind of crazy. Crazy, dude. Is it really preying on our nostalgia, or is it just giving us shit that they think that we'll want and we do fucking want, right?
Safer bet than investing in new IPs or reviving dormant ones. By feeding us the
I'm not
nostalgia
trying to pause
Kool-Aid,
it at
they
those
tap
times,
into our
chat, I
fondness for the
swear.
golden age of arcades and console classics, knowing we're more likely to spend on content tied to the games we grew up with. While this approach keeps iconic series like Street Fighter and Tekken alive and thriving, it often comes at the expense of creativity and risk-taking. Fans of cult classics, as highlighted like Darkstalkers and Rival Schools, are left longing for new entries as studios prioritize wringing every drop of profit from only their most popular brands. This strategy not only limits variety in the genre, but also highlights how nostalgia, when monetized to excess, can stifle innovation and prevent beloved but less commercially successful franchises from getting the attention they deserve. And it does a lot of explaining as to why there have been so few new fighting games.
But by this guy's logic, wouldn't Darkstalkers and Rival Schools, like if they released, like let's say they released a collection for Darkstalkers and Rival Schools, they released a collection for it, to dip their toes in the water, like they did with Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, to see if people actually want more of that. Wouldn't this guy just say, it's just a grab at our nostalgia, releasing like a classic collection, like it's just a classic collection of ancient video games? Wouldn't that be his response? Because that's what he said about Marvel vs. Capcom.
Released this year, or in the last decade at all, to be honest. It's also deeply disheartening that the broader gaming industry's obsession with live service models, battle royales and RPGs means we will get less and less fighters, as these genres offer broader appeal and higher financial
It's not
returns.
true. That game,
This
those
has pushed
developers
publishers
literally are making
further
a fighting
and
game.
further away from investing in
League of
new
Legends
fighting
has
games.
2X KO.
By this
It's
point,
coming
you
out.
could almost argue that fighting games themselves are a nostalgia genre. Fighting games, with their steep learning curves and niche appeal, are seen as riskier investments compared to more accessible genres. This is despite the fact that fighting games have a vibrant competitive scene and passionate communities that actively keep the genre alive. Unfortunately, the financial success of new fighting games often doesn't match the dedication of their fan base, making publishers hesitant to take a chance on fresh ideas. As for the rise of fighting games now being played at a professional level, occurring at the same time publishers are slowly giving us less and less fighting game content, this paradox is bittersweet. On one hand, the genre is enjoying unprecedented visibility and competitive prominence, with events and players reaching mainstream audiences. On the other, its growth is almost entirely reliant on refining and extending existing franchises rather than creating new ones. This has led to a golden age of competitive play, but a troubling decline in innovation and variety. While the spotlight on the genre has never been brighter, the shrinking number of new releases is a sad reminder of how industry priorities are increasingly driven by profit over creativity, resulting in a dire lack of diversity in the genre, and saddest of all, a lot of potential fun lost. Unless something drastically changes, the outlook for freshness in the fighting game genre is bleak, and I can only see it getting worse from here. New, big releases are becoming rarer and rarer, while the same tired big brands cling to their monopolies like dogs with an old bone. Studios seem content to milk their golden geese dry, re-releasing the same games from the same series with shiny new coats of paint and sprinkling a few nostalgia-driven DLC packs to keep us hooked.
Wait, but don't you want more fighting games, like more releases of these fighting games every year instead of, or every 2 years instead of the development cycle they've gotten? So like if we go back, every version of Third Strike looks the same. It's just got different characters and some different mechanics. So it's like a fresh coat of paint with some like a couple of different mechanics, right? Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 to Marvel vs. Capcom 3, there's some significant differences, but it's the same game that you're paying for again. It's a fresh coat of paint. And it's not even really a coat of paint at that point. Kind of confused on what you want here, buddy. You're being very contradictory. And you just said the title of your video is Why Are Fighting Games Dying? And you just said they're in a golden age. It's just there's not a whole lot of variety because, you know, it's the main titles that are still coming out. Although we have Guilty Gear Strive, Dragon Ball FighterZ, King of Fighters 15, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Game Collection, Mortal Kombat 1, fucking Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8. That's a whole lot of fighting games you can go play, right? And you said we're in a golden age. You said there's no variety. The golden age is true. The no variety is not true because you can go play all of those games. Yes, they've been out for a few years, but they're still very relevant. Like, they're dying because they're not releasing the fighting games that you want. They're dying because they're not releasing new entries in those titles every 2 years or every year. I'm trying to get a feel for this guy's take.
Meanwhile, any hope for bold, fresh entries in the genre is brushed aside as too risky because heaven forbid publishers take a chance on innovation when they can just sell us the same games for another decade. In 1999, we got Bloody Roar 2, Bariki 1, Dead or Alive 2, Fatal Fury First Contact, Fatal Fury Wild Ambition, Final Fight Revenge, Garou Mark of the Wolves, King of Fighters 99, King of Fighters EX Neoblood, King of Fighters R2, Martial Masters, Mortal Kombat Gold, Plasma Sword, Samurai Showdown 2 Pocket, Samurai Showdown Warriors Rage, Soul Calibur, SNK vs Capcom Match of the Millennium, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, and Tekken Tag Tournament, where this year we got
Yeah, that was
Tekken 8
also a crazy fucking year for fighting games. It's heralded as one of the best years for fighting games because Soul Calibur came out. Fucking Third Strike came out, bro. The Samurai Showdown game came out. King of Fighters 99 came out. Fucking, like, that was an insane year for fighting games, bro. Like, come on, let's go a little bit further. Are you going to talk about, like, 2008 to, like, 2015? The difference between Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5? I don't feel like we're being very fair here. Like, yeah, the old days where a bunch of fighting games were coming out at the same time was great. We got a lot of the titles that are, like, set in stone now, bro. Come on.
Indie games. See the problem? If this pattern continues, the fighting game industry risks becoming little more than a stagnant relic.
You can't use one of the best years ever for fighting games as an example. That's just not a fair comparison. It's really not.
Glories while alienating anyone who dares hope for something new or exciting.
So let's count the games that were actually played, that were actually popular in 1999.
Take a chance on innovation when they can just sell us the same games for another decade. In 1999, we got Bloody Roar 2.
What?
Bariki 1.
What?
Dead or Alive 2.
Dead or Alive 2. Insane.
Fatal Fury First Contact. Fatal Fury Wild Ambition. Final Fight Revenge.
Final Fight Revenge.
Garou Mark of the Wolves. King of Fighters 99.
King of Fighters 99.
King of Fighters EX Neoblood. King of Fighters R2, Martial Masters, Mortal Kombat Gold,
Mortal Kombat Gold was trash.
Plasma Sword, Samurai Showdown 2 Pocket, Samurai Showdown Warrior's Rage,
That one's pretty good.
Soul Calibur,
Soul fucking Caliber.
SNK vs Capcom Match of the Millennium,
Okay, maybe I heard him wrong. Capcom versus SNK. CVS didn't even come out that year. It was a pocket version.
Street Fighter 3
Third Strike, there's
Third
6.
Strike, and Tekken Tag Tournament.
Tekken Tag Tournament. So there's 7 major fighting games that came out that year. He just talked about 4 fighting games that came out this year. Still getting, and those were indies, fair enough. Those weren't big ones, but those were like big releases, right? Like, so let's go see Soul Calibur came out that year, but what about Dead or Alive 2? Dead or Alive 1. It came out in 1996. There was a 3-year difference between Dead or Alive 1 and Dead or Alive 2. Okay. Street Fighter 2 came out in 1991. But obviously there was a lot of like updates, right? Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which was like the most popular one, came out in 94, right? The first version of Street Fighter 3 was released in 1997. Street Fighter 3 New Generation was released in 1997. Third Strike was released in 99. So like the first edition of that game to the most popular edition of that game was 2 years. Games take time to develop, bro. Like, we're not getting them yearly. And like, even now, getting them 2016. So that's 8-year difference. Final version of SF4, because they made many. Ultra Street Fighter 4, right? So they developed that game for a hot minute, right? And that came out 2 years before Street Fighter 6, or Street Fighter 5. So they were like consistently developing that game. And then Street Fighter 6 came out in 2023, when the final version of Street Fighter 5 came out in like 2022 or 2021. I don't remember. My point is, games take time to develop, right? I don't want every fighting game to be like NetherRealm Studios. They pump those fucking games out, and half of them at this point aren't good. MKX was like the last true, agreed upon, good fighting game from NetherRealm Studios. MK11 was bad. It's not fun to play at all. Most people played that game once and were like, I'm good. I decided to make content for it, so I was forced to put hundreds of hours into it, and I hated every fucking second of it. MK1, it's not that fun. It's gotten better because it's had time, and the developers have worked on it, and the new characters they've released into it, they've listened to the community, and they made them crazier. They started out the development of that game not knowing what they wanted to fucking be. I don't want these fighting games pumped out on a bi-yearly basis like NetherRealm, because most of their games are miss, bro. They're hit or miss. So take your time, develop these bigger fighting games, do good with them, release your classic collections, dip your toes into it, dip your toes into the water, see if it's worth releasing a new game, because that's what they're doing, and if it's worth it, release one. This dude just seems very, like, pessimistic about the whole fighting game community. He seems like he really just wanted to make a video on how bad the Game Awards were, but that type of content is so saturated, he would have gotten nowhere near the views he got talking about fighting games dying, you know? And he was just very, very pessimistic about fighting games, and that fighting games are great right now. We are in a golden age again, in my opinion, for fighting games. We can go play Strive, we can play Fighters, Fighter Z, Grand Blue, which is great, King of Fighters 15. We can play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 again. It's Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8. Like, we're doing pretty good when it comes to fighting games compared to just a few years ago, where it was MK11. That was the new fighting game we had. And it was trash, you know? Like, we were not doing so good a few years ago. We're doing fine now. We're doing fine. I'm happy with where we're at. This video, it just seemed like he wanted to be controversial. Just to be.